So I recently wrote this blog about authentication using Microsoft App Center or Visual Studio App Center. It was part of a challenge I did, the October Xamarin Best Practices Challenge. And then it was featured in the weekly Xamarin newsletter. So if you are not signed up for that, go over to weeklyxamarin.com and you can subscribe to get this email address. And it mentions that it's a hand-picked best Xamarin developer links every week. So a shout out to the weekly Xamarin newsletter and Lucy Carter. And I noticed that this week, November 1st, 2019, today, that my blog was sponsored, or not sponsored, but featured in the newsletter. So under Xamarin Forums, we have authentication using Microsoft App Center. So what I wanted to do is basically a follow-up to my blog post, a video showing you how to run through the steps of getting authentication working within your Xamarin or Xamarin Forms or Xamarin native apps. So first, if we look at Visual Studio App Center and we go to the documentation, which I have it up here in another tab. If we click on the documentation tab and then we click on Auth, it shows us first of all how Auth works. But then we want to click on this Getting Started and Introduction on the left-hand side. So you'll notice there's 3 prerequisites that we need to have. We need to have an Azure subscription, so hopefully you already have an account with Azure set up. If not, you can do so for free. Head over to the Azure website. I'll have links down below, but then go over there, set up your account. You also need the App Center account set up, as well as an application. So let's go over to App Center real quick. I'm going to sign in. Again, if you don't have an account, you can create one. It's free. And then you need to create an app for each platform that you're targeting. So for instance, I have one for Android, one for iOS, one for UWP. Now, UWP does not currently support authentication. So Android and iOS are what we're going to be focusing on. If you don't have the app already created, click on this Add New at the top, Add New App. Enter a name. I usually like to add the OS as part of the name. So type that in, choose your release type, and then what OS you're using. If you're using iOS, the first option is Objective-C Swift. If you switch to Android, it changes. Java, Kotlin. But for both of these, I'm using Xamarin, right? So iOS, Android, I'm using Xamarin. So that's what I have set up here. If I go back to the instructions, the third item that we need is an Azure AD B2c Tenant. If you click on that, these are the instructions I'm going to go through right now, how we can create our Azure B2c Tenant. But you can read through this if you like. So what we need to do is go over to our Microsoft Azure and we need to create a resource. We're going to type in here B2C and click Azure Active Directory B2C. We're going to create and then create a new tenant. For the organization, I'm going to type in T Terrell and then B2C. For my domain, a basic domain, clue with your directory. All right, so I'm going to do, you can just do B2C, but you'll notice I've already created this, so it's going to give me an error. So I'm going to just add AD B2C for my name. And then we're going to click Create. Now this will take a couple minutes. So you notice here at the top under your notifications, it's showing it's creating the directory. It's also over here. So we'll wait until we get a complete for that. All right, so that is finished. I can click now on this link here, create new B2C tenant or link to existing tenant. We'll click on that. We're going to link now an existing tenant. And we're going to choose the one we just created, this T-Trail AD B2C. Yours might say something different. Our subscription, free trial. Feel free to choose whatever subscription you want. And I'm going to create a new resource group. We'll do T-Trail _ B2C _ RG for resource group. And we'll click OK. For our location, we do not want Asia. I'm going to choose the East US and click Create. All right, so we've created our tenant. We've gone through these instructions. There is a optional feature. We skipped that. And at the bottom it says next steps. We don't want to continue here. We want to go back to our App Center instructions. And you notice the first thing it says is we need to switch to our Azure AD B2C directory. So over here in Azure, we'll select this little bookmark filter at the top, switch over to our, well, let me refresh this, it's not showing up. All right, we'll try that again. And we'll select this AD B2C one here that I have created here. All right, now we want to go back to our instructions. We want to create an application. So we can come in here to, let's try B2C again. We'll do a search. And we're going to click on applications and a new application. Now this is the front-facing name for our app that will be used or will be presented to the user. So make sure it's something that's readable, that makes sense to your user. App Center demo is fine for this web API. We'll click yes. And then in the instructions where it's told under the reply URL, we can use a placeholder. We can use this right here. We'll copy and paste this. We can use this jwt.ms as a placeholder. If we continue on down the instructions, it tells us to put API here, and we want include our native clients. The instructions tell us we want MSAL and then our secret, app secret. So to get that, we need to come back over to each of our apps. We'll click in App Center. We'll click on Android and copy our app secret for Android. And we'll paste that in there. And then we need to do : //auth. We need to do the same thing. Now go back over for our iOS app. We'll copy this app secret here. We'll paste it, : //auth. We don't need to do one for UWP because it doesn't support it. Before we continue though, in the instructions, it does tell us we need to add API access. But before we do that, before we continue, we're going to look at how we can set up our identity providers. If you're using a third-party identity provider, Google, Facebook, so forth, you can continue with the steps above. But for our demonstration purposes, we're going to use Microsoft. So we'll click on that. And what we need here is to copy this URI. So we'll copy that. And we're going to paste that here under our reply URI. Now, we do need to copy as well this first part of our domain. Copy that and replace the your tenant name with that. So highlight that and paste in our new value there. Same here. And we're all set. So now we can click create. And we'll give it a second to create. And there it is, application creation successful. And here it is. If we open this up now, this is where we're going to go back to the API access instructions. We're going to add, and all we have to do is say OK because the default settings are fine. Now we'll go back over to here. We want to do a couple more things before we move on. We want to copy this. Let's see, let's click on this again. We want to copy this application ID. So we can hit the copy over here to the right. We're going to open up, for instance, Notepad. We're going to add our app ID, and then we're going to get an app secret in just a second. So we'll get that in there. So again, back over here in Azure, go back. We're going to add our identity provider. Actually, before we do that, we need to click on this app registrations preview and click on our App Center demo. And we need to click on certificates and secrets. We need to add a new client secret. So we can App Center demo password is fine. We'll click never and add. Now here we also, this is where we want to copy our secret. So right here we can hit this copy to clipboard. We'll go back over to Notepad and we'll paste that in. Now we can go back up here again. Let's see if this will work. If I tap on this, yep. And then now I can click on my identity provider. We're going to do Microsoft account. And we can just call this MSA Microsoft for Microsoft, our Microsoft account. Our client ID and secret, we want to copy those. So here's our client ID. We can paste that in. And then our app secret, client secret, we'll copy that and paste that here. And we'll hit save. And so now we're configuring our Microsoft account for authentication. Now if we go back to the instructions, this is what we went through. We went through the certificates and secrets and then configuring our identity provider. If we hit the backspace, back arrow on our browser, now we want to configure our App Center auth service. But before we do that, we want to set up a user flow here, step number 9. So let's go ahead over to back to Azure, click on our user flows. We're going to add a new user flow, a sign up, sign in user flow. And we'll just type that in, camel case, because that's what the instructions say, sign in, sign up. Here's our identity providers. If we hadn't set up the Microsoft account, we could have used the email, and that would have worked just fine. We're going to go ahead and select both of these. Multi-factor authentication, we can enable that if we want, but we are charged 3 cents per authentication for multi-factor authentication, whereas Microsoft allows you with the pay-as-you-go plan up to 50,000 authentications for free per month without the multi-factor authentication. For our user attributes, we'll click on our show more. The collect is if you'll be presented with an additional screen. The user will be presented with additional screen asking for this information underneath the collect attributes. The return attributes will return from our authentication provider. So let's return our email addresses, our provider, and our token. We can do, let's try our display name as well. And we'll say okay. And create. And we've just created our user flow. We do want to copy this name. We'll need that here in a second. So let's go ahead and right click and copy that. Now we can go over to App Center and we can connect each of our apps up to our Azure AD B2c that we just created. So let's go into Android first. We'll click on Auth and we'll connect to our Azure subscription, which I have. I'm linked to my free Azure subscription. That's great. I'm going to choose this AD B2c Tenant. That's the one I created just now in my demo. App Center demo. It walks you right through it. It's really nice. This is the scope we created earlier. Now for policy, this is where we need to paste in that user flow that we created. Hit the checkbox and connect. And just that simple, we have configured Auth for our Android app. Now let's go back and do the same for our iOS. We'll click on Auth, connect our Azure subscription, our AD B2c, that's the one I just created. Whoops, I don't want that. There we go. And again, we'll paste in our user flow, hit our checkbox, and connect. Now you'll notice here we have instructions. We're going to click on Xamarin Forms because that's what we want. We need to get our NuGet package into our app. And then we need to add this type auth in our onStart method. So let's do that first. We'll switch over to Visual Studio, which I already have an app. It's basically a file new, but I did set it up for App Center analytics and crashes. So let's right click on our solution. We're going to manage NuGet packages. Under Browse, we will search for App Center. And if you haven't done so already, you'll want this common package. You need to make sure it's installed in all of your projects. And as I mentioned, I already installed the crashes and the analytics previously. But we're going to select the Auth package now and install that to all of our projects and click Install. And we'll accept. All right, we'll save that. All right. Give that a second. Not sure why it's not responding. There we go. And we'll close that. So what we want to do here is we want to bring in our using statement. Using Microsoft App Center Auth. There it is. We want to, just before that last semicolon down here in our onStart method, add the type of auth. So now we're calling our auth API and need a closing parentheses there. So that's set up. I'm going to come over to my main page XAML. I'm going to give my label a name. We'll just say welcome label. We're going to change this to please log in. And then I'm going to add two buttons. One with the text of login, and we'll create a clicked event for that. And another button with the text of log out and a clicked event. All right, so that's set up. So we have our label, two buttons. Let's wire up our buttons here. Well, we'll do that in just a second. If we go back over to our instructions, and even though the documentation does give us instructions on this, for instance, if I click on Xamarin now on the left-hand side, if I go down, it talks about installing the NuGet packages, and then it has for Xamarin iOS, Xamarin Android, and Xamarin Forms has instructions. And it tells us additional steps for Android and iOS. I like copying it from the App Center instructions because you'll notice here it has curly brackets, your app secret. So you have to go back to App Center anyways to get that. But over here in App Center, we can just copy this, right? And it has our app secret in there. So let's go to, first of all, we'll copy this into our info plist, and we need to view it as the source code. So let's go back over to our project into iOS. We'll go to our info plist. We'll right click on that and view code. And here after our last string, we can add this. I'm going to get rid of this XML there and here. So we add that there in our info plist. We can save that. And next, we want to, in our entitlements plist, we need to add this. So we'll copy this and we'll come into our entitlements plist, into keychain, enable keychain, and we want to add new. We'll paste that in and hit enter, and we'll save this. So now we can go over to our Android app to see what specifically we need to do for Android. Again, switch this to Xamarin Form. Oh, whoops. Switch this to Auth here. And all right. For some reason, I'm not getting the instructions for my Android, but that's okay. We'll come over to our instructions here. We want to copy this code here to our Android manifest. That's really all we need for Android. So let's go over to Android and properties, and we'll go into our Android manifest. In between this application tag, we're going to paste this in. And this is, we do need to replace our app secret then. So come back over to Android. We will get our, in our overview, we will get our app secret. Copy that, paste it here. We'll save that. And now we can create our methods here in our main page. Again, we can go over to our instructions. And again, for some reason, Android is not showing it. It should. So we'll go over to iOS, Auth, and we will copy this async void here. Paste that in. All right, I'm not sure why I did it twice. There we go. And then I'm going to do another void sign out. And I'm going to copy this auth sign out. And we'll paste that there. All right. Now we want to fix this by pulling in our using statement for Microsoft Auth. And so in my first button click, I'm just going to call the sign in. Whoops. There we go. And in the sign out button clicked event, we'll call sign out. Here I will change my welcome label.text to user info. Whoops. User info dot account ID. And here I will add the welcome label.text equals unable to log in. Please try again. And in our sign out, we'll do a welcome.text equals you are signed out. And that should be all that we need. Now, you do have to try this on an actual device. So let's run this on my Android device. Authentication will not work with an emulator or simulator. So let's try this first with my Android device. And now it's spinning up. And we can log in. Please log in. We'll click on login. It's taking us to our Active Directory B2c Tenant we created. And you notice we have two options. We have the Microsoft account social login, but then we also have where the user can choose their email and password. And that's because we click both those check boxes. Now if let's do the Microsoft account. And we'll say yes, give our app access. And there is over here, our account ID, right? There it is. If I log out, you are signed out. And I can log back in. Microsoft account, social account, and I'm back in. So now to test this on iOS, you do need a device as well. Again, you can't use a simulator, but your device also needs to be provisioned. So I have a link on how you can do that. But so another thing I want to mention is the authentication with Microsoft App Center is really nice because you can use it along with other things, such as your push notifications, your data, your analytics. So there's full documentation on how to tie in the authentication, the user account information with each of the other services that App Center provides. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments, please leave them here on my blog or also on my YouTube channel.